Well, thank you so much for that introduction. I'm really excited to be here, and it's cool to be sharing the session with Dr. Stroman because I went to the University of Virginia also. So to kind of, be up here with her is really a cool experience for me. And also because like she mentioned, she is a former basketball coach for UNC as well. So it's neat to have a chance to hear her perspective on some of these things that I want to talk about today, which is basically communicating information about analytics to coaches. So Tamara, is my screen sharing okay?
Yes, it's perfect. I can see it.
Yeah, so I'm here from Synergy Sports Technology, and this is what Synergy does. It's basically a coaching analytics platform, and that means that we're using video and data to help coaches make winning team strategies. So we have this group of loggers who are like essentially amateur scouts who watch every scoring possession from every game, from every league that we can get our hands on. So that's all the NBA teams are customers of ours, almost all of the Division I men's programs, WNBA, women's college basketball, JUCO, high school, AAU, grassroots, literally like every league we can try to watch. And that includes the CIAA and Johnson C. Smith. So I'm going to share some data from those teams later on today. But basically what the loggers do is they watch these scoring possessions and they try to characterize what happened with some tags. So they're paying attention to who took the shot, whether the shot went in or missed, whether there was a turnover or a shooting foul. They're keeping track of where the defense was, who was on the court, and also what kind of play developed into the scoring chance. So was it an isolation or a pick and roll, a post up or a transition play? And they keep track of all that information for all these different scoring chances. And then as a coach, you can go in to the platform and check out your own team. So this is the Johnson C. Smith sort of a snippet from our product where we're looking at the play types page. So again, this is showing for each row here, the different ways that the team has tried to score over the course of the season. So there's post-up opportunities, scoring in transition, scoring from spot ups. And what you can see is that for any of these blue links, you can go in and watch the video of what happened in that particular situation. So if you want to see every time your team tried a post up and it ended with a turnover, you can watch that. Or if you're going in to do opponent scouting and you want to see every time that your opponent went in and tried to do a transition scoring chance and got a shooting foul, you can watch those plays. And then the sort of added perk of doing this logging is that you get the data layer on top of the video. So in addition to being able to watch the clips, you can see, okay, of these 193 times that we tried to score in the post, we got 160 points, and that translates to a point per possession scoring rate. And by understanding that information, you can kind of see what your own team strengths and weaknesses are and sort of either prepare to improve that or lean into your strengths, and also anticipate what your opponent's strengths and weaknesses are going to be and prepare a game plan to sort of be ready for those strengths and weaknesses. So in addition to that sort of core coaching analytics platform, Synergy also makes stats for fans to look at, and we do some stuff for media as well. So a couple of weeks ago, Dr. Debbie mentioned John Hollinger. He was part of this analytics broadcast on CBS Sports Network where they shared some kind of next level in-depth Synergy stats. So it was this kind of stuff here, like Xavier Johnson from George Mason. We had a breakdown of how often he drives to the left and how often he drives to the right, and like what his scoring rate was in each one of those situations. Or looking at Jacob Gilyard from Richmond and showing what his tendencies are in the pick and roll, how often he keeps the ball for himself as the scorer, or how often he passes to a teammate, either the roll man or somebody spotting up in the wing or cutting to the basket, and how often his team scores in each one of those situations. So that's kind of like next level information that can be useful for a broadcast for media partners. So that's kind of what Synergy does, but what my team specifically does, my team's the Analytics and Insights team, which is a newly formed team. We just started this summer, and I just started at Synergy this summer. So we're 3 people, and what we're trying to do is, the basic goal is the same as the companies, which is to help coaches make better strategic decisions. But it's essentially helping coaches try to answer all the same fundamental questions that they've always been trying to answer. So like, what's the biggest threat for the opponent that we're going to play next week? Or who are the players on my team that I should be playing more often? Or who are the players that I should be playing together in combinations that work really well together? Or what are the actions that we're running that are leading to good shots or leading to bad shots? These sort of really fundamental questions of basketball coaching that people have always been trying to figure out. We just want to help people answer those questions, but do it in a way that potentially speeds up their workflow or makes it a little easier for them to make those decisions based on data. So the kind of thing that I'm talking about is like, all right, maybe as a coach, you are already planning to watch every post up from the big man on the opponent that you're going to play next week. But as a team for the analytics and insights team, we could do something like building a model with machine learning that allows us to predict the probability that a particular team is going to win the game based on the score and the time remaining at any point during the game. And then we can use that model to sort of create a filter that will allow us to get rid of garbage time possessions. So like these situations where the game is already decided and the teams aren't really playing at full strength or full intensity, maybe coach doesn't want to watch that as part of the prep for next week's games. So as an analytics team, we can strip away those possessions that are sort of less meaningful and just focus on the stuff that's really useful. And again, that's supposed to speed up the efficiency of the coach's workflow. And we really want to focus on surfacing things that are useful, actionable insights that the coach can act on and build strategy from. So one of the challenges of Synergy is that because there's so many ways of splicing and chopping up the data, there's a potential for coaches to be overwhelmed by all the different ways they can look at the information. So what we want to do as a team is sort of show people the things that are most useful to them so that they can trust us as information providers, and then so that they can act on the information that we're providing them. And we really want to try to meet coaches where they are. So that means presenting information in a way that is in the basketball language that they're used to speaking, and hopefully in a way that's not intimidating or adding any complexity. So we want to present information in really straightforward ways and simple ways, and I'll show you a success story of that at the end here. So that's kind of what Synergy does. That's what my team within Synergy does. But this is what I like to do, which is dig into tricky basketball questions and then share what I find through these inviting and engaging charts and tables. Hopefully they're inviting and engaging. And I like to try to make data fun and accessible for people. But if I'm honest, what I also like to do is make vids that get attention and impress people. And, you know, I honestly like to show off a little bit. So this is like me using donut holes to show every time that somebody dunked in the first few games of last year's playoffs. Or this is me like laying out 3,000 tiny little plastic trays to represent all of the trays that Steph Curry has made over his career when he passed Ray Allen's record a few weeks ago to become the top three-point shooter in NBA history. Or this is me using like little pieces of fabric and buttons to sort of represent fashion trends that have sort of passed over the past 40 years of draft night parties. So looking at the color of the suits and the style of the jackets that have been worn, the number of buttons and sort of the trends in neckties and bow ties and bolo ties, whatever. So for the most part, those things that I like to do and the things that my team are supposed to be doing are pretty well aligned. So that's good. But there are some times when they're not aligned. And I had kind of a moment a couple of weeks ago where I had an opportunity to check myself and say, okay, I think I might be heading a little bit too far in the wrong direction here. So this was a chart that I tried to make that was supposed to show how rookies were adjusting to the NBA life. And generally what you see with rookies is that you're going to have a smaller responsibility on your NBA team, or you're going to score less efficiently than you did at the previous level, or maybe both. So that's kind of what the chart was supposed to show. But the reaction that I got was pretty negative. And it was sort of like accusing me of making something that was trying to look good rather than something that was conveying information. And that really kind of struck me to my core because that's what I feel like I'm good at. And I want to be able to convey information simply. So to see that people were reacting like this to the chart was upsetting to me. And some people, you know, even like poking a little fun at it with this, like just saying it was overly complicated, basically. So when I try to think about like the work that I'm doing, sometimes I try to put it on these two axes, from practical on the left to artistic on the right, and from simple to read on the bottom to really intricate on the top. So the chart that I was just showing you was kind of falling into this category of the upper left quadrant, which is almost like, you know, the quadrant of failure, I would say. So like it's something that you were trying to make that was meant to be practical and useful, but it ended up being complicated or convoluted. So that's like a realm of basically like first draft only. If you do that, I feel like you're basically not creating something that's going to be a final product or something that is going to be like a template that you'll reuse in the future. It's basically like, okay, you tried and it didn't work the way you're hoping it to. So now let's try again. In the opposite corner, which is this sort of simple to read, but kind of artistic quadrant, I would say that's sort of where that Steph Curry Trey project would land. So it's like something that didn't have a ton of information. You know, it's just basically showing shot locations for Steph's threes over the course of his career. But it was presented in kind of a cool and engaging way. And that's perfect for Twitter because it's like something people will share and they'll retweet and they'll like. But it's not something that's going to be kind of useful to come back to and use over and over again. Up in the upper right-hand corner, that's sort of where you're doing artistic but complex or complicated stuff. And that's maybe going to just sort of narrow your scope of your audience a little bit because it's only going to be those people who really want to have spending time kind of digging into whatever this project is to kind of understand it in a really complicated way. And maybe that's fine. There's room for passion projects too, but it's not going to be something that's like really resonating with a ton of people probably. But what I want to do in starting in Synergy in this summer is sort of push more and more into this left-hand quadrant at the bottom, where I'm looking for things that are both easy to read and super practical. This is what I want to be making for coaches. And this is where I try to put my focus and my energy for the things that I'm building for work. So things that, again, are going back to my goals here, things that are meeting coaches where they are and making things that are easy for them to digest, and also making things that are going to speed up their workflow and be super useful for them. So I'm going to go through a couple of examples of stuff we've been working on. And honestly, they're not fully pushed into that bottom left-hand quadrant that I'm trying to work towards yet. These are sort of things that are in the middle still, in between that area of like being eye-catching and being useful. So they're not things that I would put directly into the Synergy product yet. They're sort of working charts that might be like engaging for people on Twitter, maybe sort of show that we're doing interesting stuff as a group, but still need more work to kind of get to a place where they're really simple to understand. So I'll walk you through this one. This is looking at scoring rates for players from the CIAA this season by play type. So there's 4 different columns here with the 4 different colors showing 4 different play types. So these are situations where someone was spotting up to try to score, in transition, off of a cut, or putting the ball back in after an offensive rebound. The vertical axis is showing points per possession. So that's the scoring rate. So the higher you are on the chart, the better you're doing. That's the more efficient scoring. The lower you are on the chart, the worse off you are. Each one of the bubbles is a person, where the size of the bubble indicates how many shots or how many possessions that person used in trying to score. And then the way that the chart works is basically showing the distribution of the different scoring rates across the conference. So the places where the bubbles bunch up and spread out, that's showing places where there's a lot of people who have the same scoring rate. And the places where the bubbles stretch out and kind of align on the line, those are the places where there's less overlap between scoring rates between players. So our mystery player here has the 12th highest spot up scoring rate out of 125 players who had 10 plus scoring chances from spot ups, which is a very good rating. And she has the 29th out of 128 ranking in transition. So anybody want to hazard a guess who this might be in the chat? This is someone from the JCSU women's team. So she's, again, scoring really efficiently in spot up situations and in transition. No guesses? All right. This is the CIAA Rookie of the Year, Sierra Harris. So she was crushing it this season, had a really efficient job from the wing and scoring transition. This is a different chart that represents some of the same information. So again, we're looking at play types here. Now each play type is a different colored box. So these are different ways of trying to score. And here, the width of the box represents how often the team or player was trying to score in that particular way. And the height of the box represents how effectively they were doing it. So this particular chart is showing average NBA Summer League scoring rates from last summer's games. So what you see is that the spot up scoring chance is the most common way for people to try to score in Summer League, followed by pick and roll ball handler action, and then transition. There's a ton of transition in Summer League. And then the height of the boxes show how effective they are. So the juiciest looks came as cuts that are sort of going towards the basket at 1.21 points per possession. And the sort of harder ways to score are off the post or scoring by yourself as the pick and roll ball handler. All right, so here's another example of one of these charts, but now we're looking at a particular player's scoring rates. So what we see is this player has a lot of the big man stuff, cuts, putbacks, and a ton of post up, as well as some transition. And any guesses as who this might be? This is a player from the men's team. I thought there would be more JCSU students, I guess, on this, but all right, this is the all CIA center, Augustine Aminu. And you can see he was super efficient scoring on cuts, so like kind of cutting to the basket and getting the ball and dunking it, as well as in transition, really, really efficient in transition. All right, now let's compare that to this mystery NBA player. So the way that this chart works is it's basically a mirror image on the bottom where we're seeing, okay, a comparison. So this is one way that we could use this kind of information as like a way to look at comps or as a way to compare two different players and see how they're similar or dissimilar. So in this case, we see this new yellow box pops up here for the pick and roll man stuff. So JCSU isn't running a lot of ball screens, not a lot of pick and roll action. So Aminu doesn't really have a chance to do pick and roll man stuff, but this NBA player is doing that. The other big difference is that Aminu is doing a lot more in transition than our NBA player here. The NBA player is not a super mobile guy. And you can see, okay, the NBA player has a even more efficient post-up game than Aminu. So any guesses as to who this NBA player might be? One of the most efficient post-up players in the league right now.
Giannis.
It's not Giannis. Giannis would have more pick and roll ball handler stuff, ISO stuff, because he's on the ball more often. This player is almost exclusively doing big man stuff in the post. So a real
Embiid.
What's that?
Joel Embiid.
Embiid? Nope, getting closer, but even Embiid is more varied in the way that he tries to score. He uses ISO more than this person.
There are a couple guesses in the chat. Rob Williams, Jared Allen.
All right, we're getting closer. This is was there one more guess?
Is it Jokic?
No, it's not Jokic. This is Boban Marjanovic. So Boban is a 7'4", 7'10" wingspan giant in the NBA who can dunk without jumping off the ground. And he's the like king of post-up efficiency. He can't really play defense because he's so big, but he is really super efficient on offense. And you can see how Aminu matches up with him pretty favorably in terms of his efficient scoring rates. So on cuts, Aminu's actually scoring more often than Boban, and on post-ups, he's not quite as efficient, but doing a pretty good job, and like absolutely amazing in transition again. So a way to compare players, a way to think about player types, and understand what kind of different players there are around the league. So I mentioned that we want to be able to create things that are like actionable and things that coaches can take meaningful insight from and then use as a building strategy. So one way that we try to get ideas to do that is with this area on our website where we can ask coaches or other customers to provide requests for features that we don't have yet. So this is one of the requests we got. I'm going to read it to you. There's a top prospect this year who almost never goes left and almost always tries to get back to his right when he does. And with only one finish all year, starting left and finishing left, this explains his questionable finishing skills. And I think this type of information would be incredibly useful to coaches who want to scout players and game plan for them. So we thought that was a really cool idea. It's not something that we currently record. We have the direction of the drive, right or left, but we don't record information about whether you're finishing with your left or your right hand. So I actually went and did like a data collection project for this, which if you're trying to get into the analytics field is a great way to get started. Collecting your own data is really fun. And gives you an opportunity to talk about something that nobody else has ever talked about, which is cool. So in this case, I was watching 1,000 layups from 20 prospects for the next NBA draft and sort of looking at, okay, for every layup that these players had taken, which shooting hand did they use? Which direction did they approach the basket from? Did the shot go in or not? Those were the things that I was collecting information on. Some other stuff I could have looked at that I didn't, as like footwork, were they jumping off 1 foot or 2? Were they using spin off the glass as a reverse shot or something like that? And we actually had the exact shot angle, but I didn't use it for this project. So the first draft of like presenting this information was this one. It actually packs all of the information into one chart. So it's got shooting hand, side of the basket, how many field goal attempts you have in each of those situations, and your field goal percentage in each one of those situations. It's got 9 different panels for 9 different players, and it sort of has it all there. Now I was really excited about this. I was like, okay, cool, I have it all. It all fit in there. It took me a while to like get that to work out. And I showed it to somebody else, one of my colleagues, and he was like, no, man, that's not gonna work. So going back to that sort of chart of like where we want to be in that bottom left-hand corner, practical and simple to read, that chart was probably not checking the box for simple to read. A little too much going on there, and definitely not meeting coaches where they are in terms of presenting something that they're going to feel comfortable looking at. So I tried to go back to the drawing board and like deconstruct that chart into its components, and started with this one that's basically just showing which side of the basket did you approach from when taking your layup. And I tried to do it in an intuitive way where each one of the panels has these 3 blue arrows that show, okay, this is how often you go from the left, how often you go from the middle, and how often you go from the right. So you see somebody like Ty Washington Jr. goes from the right a lot. Someone like Jalen Duren almost never goes from the left. Someone like Chet Holmgren goes from the middle more than other players. And someone like Paolo Banchero has sort of a balanced approach going from each of the 3 directions when taking layups. And then I tried to sort of one step further from that simplest version of the chart to changing those arrows into bars and changing the bar color to represent the field goal percentage. So in the previous chart, we didn't have anything about which hand they were using or how often the shot was going in. So now we're adding one additional piece by saying, okay, look at the color, and that's going to tell you, did this guy actually make the shots on the left side? Did he make the shots on the right side or not? So here, if you see red for Chet Holmgren, that means he's making a ton of those layups. If you see blue for Ty Washington, that means he's missing a lot of those layups from the left side. But we're still not showing anything about shooting hand here. So the next version of this chart was showing shooting hand. We've sort of left out the side of the basket component of this here, but now we're just looking at how often they finish with their right, and how often they finish with their left. So for Johnny Davis, you see, okay, he's got the most balanced sort of finishing here, where almost half of his layups are coming with the left hand, 40% left-handed, 60% right-handed. Everybody else has a bigger right hand, which means they're using their right hand more often, including Jalen Duren, who's using 100% right hand on all of his layups. And then you can see with the color, like we saw in the previous chart, how well they're finishing with each hand. So for Ty Washington, he didn't use his left hand very often, but when he did, he was really unsuccessful with it. So he only made 1 out of 10 lefty layups that I saw. So this was cool because we saw positive reaction to both versions of the chart. So the more complicated version of the chart that I've started with, this person is like an Ivy League professor, and he has made graphics for the New York Times. So it's kind of like cool that he was excited about how much information was packed in that chart. Like that's kind of what I was going for. So I was happy that like on some like academic level, the chart was working. But this was the one I was really excited about. So this was a coach who saw the hand chart and actually tagged in all of his players and said, you know, this is reinforcing why we've been practicing this technique of locking it on the left, which means getting up in the player's right hand dribble side, forcing them to their weak hand and forcing them to finish with their weak hand. So this coach at least felt like this chart was resonating and felt like it would resonate even with his players, which is really exciting for me and kind of what we were going for. So I think I'll leave this here. Probably Dr. Stroman is a better person to talk to about this kind of stuff, but this is what worked for me in making my career transition into basketball. Certainly, if you want to get in the sports world, you have to network a lot. Doing it on LinkedIn, Twitter worked for me. You want to use your time as a student to tool up. Dr. Stroman talked about R and Python, which are big tools in the analytics world. So if you have time now to try to pick up those skills, that's really great, because it's going to be hard to do that once you have a full-time job, if you don't already. Make a portfolio of your data projects. This is something that I think is really useful. I talked about doing your own data collection. It can be fun too. So I think if you find that you're not having fun along the way, it's maybe a sign that you're, not going to like the job once you have it. So I think you want to try to lean into things that are fun to do the data projects, and they're fun to learn the skills, and then go in that direction. That's the stuff that you're enjoying doing. So that's it for me. I'll leave my contact information in here, and if anybody wants to talk more, I'm happy to chat.
All right, do we have any questions? Colleagues or scholars, do you have any questions for Dr. Stroman or Dr. Whitehead?
Yes, can you put his information in the chat?
Absolutely, yeah.
Thank you.
I mean, I would like to say, first and foremost, thank you all for coming and, providing this information and insight to our students and staff. I mean, as a coach here at the university, this is information and data that we use on a daily basis. And I can 100% agree how important analytics has become, and the direction that it's going, how it helps us in all sports. So we really appreciate that.
Thank you. As we're waiting for questions, I'll also add that this is really the space if you are entrepreneurial, if you are creative, if you're imaginative. This allows you to stay close to the sport, but to do you. And I've seen so many young people who've always had this interest, and they tried to get a job and it didn't work out, the job that they wanted, and they just started collecting data, running their own models, and then they become attractive, or now they have their own side gig, their own side hustle. So there are so many ways to have fun in this space, but to also pay your bills. How about in the chat box? Anybody doing their own number crunching now? Doing any modeling, anything? Tell us what you're up to, at least in the chat box.
Do we have any student athletes? Any student athletes in this session? This should be very useful information to you in particular. Okay, it looks like Tamara, do you have a question, or you're just
yes, I do have a
question?
question. Yeah, I do have a question. So for me, as I expressed to you, I am interested. One of the things I do want to do when I do enter the sports arena is where exactly, this is both for Dr. Stroman and for Dr. Whitehead, where exactly can students who are interested in sport analytics can take the classes or certifications to be able to get those credentials?
So certainly universities are offering classes now, and there are also entrepreneurs who are stats nerds. And I say that in a loving, kind way. I'm a nerd, okay? But they actually are offering their own workshops, their own courses. So you can just Google, basketball analytics. Probably my work will come up, the Basketball Analytics Summit. But there are people who are certainly much better at statistics than I am, that actually do a deeper dive like Dr. Whitehead and offer a course. The other thing is, remember that you all can create things. So not one student, but if more than one student approaches a professor, approaches a dean, approaches the provost and saying, we want an analytics course on sports, they will create it. So all you have to do is just talk to one another and say, this is what we want. And if you can identify an instructor that might not even be on your campus that's willing to come teach it, that's how it happens. This just catches on like wildfire. Dr. Whitehead, you want to add to that?
Yeah, it's been really cool to see how it's evolved over the past couple of years and how it has sort of become more of a formal part of programs around universities. A couple of years ago, it seemed like it was mostly club driven, where it would be like a student organization. But yeah, that still requires you to have someone to kind of be the mentor, which I guess is a challenge. I think, in my experience, it was really useful to do these sort of portfolio projects to get started as a way of dipping your toe in. But yeah, that doesn't answer the question of like, where can you get mentorship? There are like these paid courses, like Dr. Stroman was mentioning, like the sports business classroom is one. But yeah, it's kind of an investment to do. So if you could have it through your university, that would be awesome. To some extent, you can learn from people that are sharing stuff on Twitter, like people like Ben Taylor, or I could share like a list of books that I would find useful, like the Basketball on Paper one's a great place to start. Thinking Basketball by Ben Taylor is another good one. Seth Partnow just wrote a book about basketball analytics that I think is helpful. So that's like a place where you could get started. But yeah, I think having a longer term mentor is certainly helpful. We don't have a course per se right now. We are kind of involved in a couple of those paid course offerings, but we don't have our own at the moment. But I'm certainly willing to help people with that if they want to get more into it.
Thank you both.
Mhm.
I see a question in the chat for me. Can I jump on it? What software do I use to make graphics and visuals for data? I think the program that I honestly use most often to make stuff is Excel and PowerPoint. So it's like a combination of Excel and PowerPoint. So what I'll do is like make the core of the chart in Excel and then add like annotations, like comments in PowerPoint, and do sort of the layout in PowerPoint. So you can get pretty far with just that. The thing that's really nice about R is that it handles, and that's sort of this sort of more heavy duty programming language that Dr. Stroman mentioned earlier. R is nice because it can handle like bigger data and can kind of like do more complicated data processing steps than Excel can do easily, like merging two sources of information together based on the player name or something like that. So if you want to get into more complicated stuff, that kind of programming language, it can be really useful. And it's also good for like repeating something very quickly if you want to use the exact same template over and over again. And R is also another program that's free, so that's nice. And there's a community online that is pretty supportive for learning how to use it. So you can make something like a R Shiny app that's pretty complicated, pretty fancy, and would be pretty impressive to a team, all for free if you could, figure out how to do it.